In this episode of Crunch Week, we're talking about Microsoft's hunt for a new CEO, Google selling off its Motorola mobility segment, and Facebook's brand new Paper app. Hey there, welcome to Crunch Week. I'm Colleen Taylor.
I'm Ryan Lawler.
And I'm Alex.
And we are here another week, a huge week for tech news.
Insane.
We had to narrow it down to just a few stories, but there's been so much. But let's just kick it right off with one of the biggest blue chip companies, Microsoft. Still, no CEO decision at the helm.
No, not yet, but we might be very close. We appear to be closing in on my personal pick, so I'm very happy with this, Satya Nadella. But literally about half an hour ago, a story came out that put a Google executive up top, but that was immediately mocked all over Twitter, so I don't think we're handicapping that very high. I mean, the Journal reported on Satya, Rika reported on Satya, and then Bloomberg broke that story. So all big signals point towards Nadella being the next CEO, maybe sometime as early as next week.
Okay, why is he your favorite?
Well, I like him. I mean, he's fundamentally a nice human, which goes a long way in something like this. But I mean, the real reason is that he's brilliant at cloud technology and enterprise-facing stuff, which Microsoft makes the majority of its money on. The issue with him is we don't know if he's going to be that good at consumer-facing stuff, Surface, Xbox Music, whatever. So the question is, does he have enough kind of executive-level leadership underneath him if he becomes a CEO to handle that? And that's, you got to just make a bet. And I think he'd be good at it, but I could be wrong on that.
Well, I think one of the other interesting things about this story is they're talking about Bill Gates stepping down from his chairman role and actually becoming more involved in the day-to-day operations, sort of as an advisor to Satya, and actually getting a lot more involved as a result. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it frees him from having any sort of responsibility. I mean, he would just become an informal advisor. I mean, right, because being chairman of the board has legal responsibilities and whatnot. So that would allow them to put someone that they want to kind of be the external boss there, move Gates more close to the actual company itself, have him help Satya to get us on his feet. I mean, it's an $80 billion a year company. It's relatively complex, and Bill knows it pretty well. So if we did all that, I think you would have very good board leadership. Satya would be very good as the CEO, and with Bill Gates supporting them, I like that. I
think both of these options that have been thrown out in the public are kind of surprising when you go from a huge personality like Ballmer has been. I mean, this guy who goes out on stage and he can really fill up a stadium with his personality.
Yes,
and both Sundar Pichai from Google and Satya are these a lot more measured kind of business technologist types.
Their sweaters are always on the proper angle. They're lined up. They're fundamentally nerds. I mean, that's what they are. And that's great in technology, and I don't think it's a negative term in the slightest. But you're right. We're not going to see Satya Nadella on the stage doing the Bill Ballmer monkey dance with all the sweat and whatnot. We'll miss that, but I think change would be fine.
Well, I think the other thing that we're kind of talking about in them being geeks is that they're actual technologists, they're product guys. Ballmer was a sales guy, and for years had kind of been knocked on that. Because he was running it from sales and loss perspective as opposed to looking for innovative new technologies and future of computing, that type of thing. That was kind of the knock against Microsoft for years.
Right, and that's why people said Sanofsky may have been the next CEO because he had the drive to create Office 2010 and Surface and Windows 8, and maybe he could push the company forward, but he was so disliked internally he did not get to stick around.
So hopefully we'll get a decision on that soon, and then we'll know who
so tune in next week to Crunch Week.
Tune in. And so another big story this week, of course, Google selling off the Motorola mobility segment to Lenovo for $2.9 billion, which is a lot of money, of course, but it seemed like a big change from just a couple of years ago when Motorola was sold to Google for $12.5 billion. So to go from $12.5 billion to $2.9, I think at first everyone thought, wow, Google is taking a big loss on this, but it's turned out that that's not really the case, that Google has made more money from this segment.
I think they just lost less money than we thought. But Brian, do you want to break down the numbers?
Yeah, I was going to say, so yeah, it was originally 12.5, but they sold it for 2.9. The home division sold for, I think, 2.4 previously. And, they're keeping a lot of the patents, which when the acquisition first came about, there was a lot of talk about how the real value of Motorola wasn't in, the device manufacturing. It was actually in the patent portfolio. So they're keeping a lot of that. Lenovo is getting, I think, 2,000 patents out of the deal. And Google also is keeping the Advanced Technology Unit, which is, building sort of next-gen hardware stuff. But basically, the other thing that this means is that Tony Fadell and the team from Nest is really going to be spearheading their internal hardware development going forward.
Yeah, that's really what I think a lot of people here at TechCrunch had heard, sort of internal reporters here had heard from their sources that Nest was really going to be the new division, the hardware division within Google, and obviously that puts them in competition from Motorola. So it's not too surprising to see a divestiture after this other big acquisition.
Also, Motorola lost a lot of money. It was a big drag on their EPS. And think about it, they've divested this money-losing asset, if you can call it an asset, and they returned their licensing patents they already owned to Lenovo. So this can become a profitable source for them as opposed to a source of losses. So from a financial wonk perspective, this is great.
Yeah. It just seems like since the beginning of the year, really, or the end of last year, Google has just been moving really fast. It's like every other day there's a new big acquisition, there's a new big announcement. I think it seems like they're really taking, at the executive levels, this really strong vote of confidence that they have from Wall Street. I mean, their stock is at all-time highs right now, and they're just taking some big risks and big moves and doing some interesting things. I don't think it's the end of it yet.
Well, earlier in the week, earlier in the week it was reported they bought DeepMind technology, which was another thing that could have been part of Crunch Week if this Lenovo sale didn't happen for 500 million, something like that.
That's insane.
So yeah, they're moving extremely fast, and I think it's interesting because so much of their profits are still wrapped up in search and online ads and all of that, but they are working so hard to get into hardware to diversify their assets from a future performing standpoint that they're a really interesting company right now.
And so this wouldn't be complete without talking about the other big tech company, Facebook.
Yeah,
what happened
Facebook,
there?
So Facebook, well, first of all, they did earnings, and they announced that I think 53% of all of their advertising revenue comes from mobile. So it shouldn't be a surprise that they also sort of pre-announced a new mobile product called Paper. And what Paper is it's basically a reimagining of their news feed. For people who like the Facebook news feed but don't like going to Facebook, they'll now have it in its own app. And so it's kind of a Flipboard competitor, but not totally. There's a mix of machine learning algorithms and also editorial curation. They're hiring editors to, pick the stories that will show up across, certain different verticals.
But it's news content, right? This isn't just it won't be like my friend got engaged in Paper.
It's both.
Oh, really?
It's both.
That's interesting.
So it's interesting because it's, it will be, news and articles from around the web as well as things that are happening with your friends or within your social circle, but it'll have a much sleeker presentation than what you have in sort of the gross news feed today.
This just seems to be the first step in a larger strategy that Mark Zuckerberg has been talking about. I mean, this week is their 10th anniversary of Facebook, which makes me feel really old. But he talked this week, I think, in a big Business Week article about, Paper and these other apps that are going to be coming out. He's no longer believing that Facebook just has to be this one experience and this one app and this one news feed. So this is a pretty big change. We could start to see more standalone apps from Facebook that might not even say Facebook many places on them. It doesn't seem like Paper is heavily branded at all with the Facebook stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a strategy that they've been sort of going towards for a while now. I mean, they launched Facebook Messenger, they did Facebook Poke, they've got Facebook Groups. And what you're probably going to see is like Facebook will be sort of on the back end, the thing that powers all of these things, but there will be an individual app for messaging. There will be an individual app probably for events going forward. There'll be, Paper. So you will have a lot of standalone apps, and that's kind of the way that the mobile ecosystem is going anyway.
Alex,
right?
You're the resident young person at this table.
Oh,
so just speaking as
I'm the
expert,
least cool young person ever.
what do you think? Do you think that Facebook, is this a good strategy? Do you log into Facebook that often?
No. Not
No.
really. Well, then I don't really Snapchat much either. I mean, I'm not cool, so I don't really follow these trends that much. We should get Josh in here.
Right.
But I thought paper as an application looked beautiful. I liked the layout. I liked the UI. I can see myself maybe using that if it's not too heavy on engagement and more heavy on content. But look at Poke, right? It fell flat in like 8 minutes, and Home was a debacle, and now we have Papers. A lot of one-word apps. I don't know how they're going to fare, but I mean, if they're seeing engagement declines in their core young demographics, they need to find some way to reach those. And if they're moving towards these single-use experiences, it makes sense to follow, but they're still following. And I don't know if their overall momentum as a company with their user base can allow them to follow and still win, as Microsoft did for decades. But we'll have to see. I'm dubious, but optimistic, I'd say.
Okay, that's a good way to be. I just miss good old-fashioned RSS readers when those were easier to come by. I just still use my RSS reader. I was sad to see Google Reader go. I now use NewsBlur every day. I don't know that I'll have room for paper in my life.
You know what I really love? Actually, I'm just going to put a shameless plug in here. I really love Prismatic, but it seems like no one uses it. It's a really awesome application, because it's not just the stuff that you explicitly opt into. It's also surfacing, stuff that you would find interesting based on other things that you clicked on, and things within not even from a social perspective within your network. So, I don't know. I think it's cool, but
Prismatic.com, I assume.
yeah.
We'll see if paper can beat Prismatic. We'll all have to stay tuned. But for now, that's all the time we have. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.